I'm specifically focused on the US market and currently focused on California and certain initiatives in California. The Citizenship Market Development Team is a part of a much broader team, the AI Sustainability and Market Development Team. And the idea is that as you build community relationships and as you build inroads into communities, you're actually creating pathways for AI and sustainability and tech as well. And so I can get a little, into that a little more during my talk.
Great, thanks. So I believe now we can get started, and I just started recording, so we can get going. I believe you should have sharing your screen enabled.
Yeah, I'm gonna be without slides for a little bit, and then I'll switch over to something. So first of all, Sanjana and Anushka, thank you so much for having me. When you gave me sort of this broad question or this broad ambit of talking about sustainability and AI, I really began thinking about what is sustainability? What is sustainability in the broadest sense? In the past, often people spoke about sustainability in terms of the environment, but it's really a commitment to protect both people and planet and its longevity. And so, why is this important? And I think it's particularly important for, younger generations to carry the torch because there's not only this element of preservation of the status quo, but it is how do we make things better for the overall well-being of society? How do we make things better for our own health, for our own lives? And what that has to do with the type of lives we want to lead and our purpose, how we want to connect to our community, how we want to connect to our families. So there's this interplay between people, society, human capital, how business is done, and the planet itself, its resources, how we care for it, how we utilize those resources. So it's a really nice interplay. And if you think about the role of technology, technology has significantly accelerated the rate of progress around some of these things. Excuse me. Enabled solutions, enabled us to reach into very hard to reach communities with, for example, mobile, broadband, etc. At the same rate, because technology is moving so quickly, there's also a risk that the digital divide is increasing. So you see those who have resources really benefiting from technology in a way that you may not see others. So how do we really use technology to close the digital divide? So that is one of the gaps that comes up again and again. And then as we think about AI, a gap that arises again and again is the data that we have, the data we currently have, the pools of data we currently have don't necessarily cover all communities or all segments of the population equally. So how do we close that data gap as well quickly enough so that we're not designing for or creating tools that don't work for everyone or don't work for all? So I think that's where this notion of for all comes in. And when we think about sustainability, AI, the usage of technology, the framework shouldn't be just do no harm, although do no harm is important. It should be about how do we create greater positive value for our communities and for more communities, and how do we apply a lens of for all and equality. And one concept that often gets discussed in technology is proximity design. So how do you work in partnership with diverse communities to really design, develop, and bring products to life and bring products to market? So as I was thinking about, the role of people like you and me or change makers, whether they are creatives or business people or entrepreneurs, etc., especially youth, how can they in their own lives, contribute to this space? Excuse me, I had to cough. So I think one thing is just figuring out, where your passion lies, because each of us can't solve for education, gender, sustainability, like all these different topics. We each can't solve for all of them, whether we take the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals, etc. So we have to figure out what speaks to us, what speaks to our communities, and where we can really have that personal impact. And then how can we bring our assets along with us? Assets being our relationships, our social capital, our community needs, what we're hearing on the ground, our talents, whether we're engineering focused or we're more focused on the creative arts. How can we build a picture so that whatever we spend our lives on, our day-to-day jobs, truly are a reflection of not only a profession or a job we've chosen, but yet rather our broader purpose and our broader ethos and philosophy. Much easier said than done, because the way in which jobs are structured these days or opportunities are structured these days, um, there isn't that direct connection sometimes between what you're passionate about and your impact and then the profession you're doing. I do think that's changing, and there are avenues, and we can talk a little bit more about this, and roads that are opening to kind of connect your creativity, connect where you want to have social impact, connect your knack for technology or AI. There are inroads and there are ways to connect those dots. And I think part of it starts with just building those relationships with experts who are already working on some of these solutions. So I really like the fact that I'm getting to meet all of you who are probably working on very, interesting projects. And the way I view it is, this is not, just a sort of a job or just a project. Rather, it's a self-discovery journey for you. It's a co-creation journey for you. And when people like myself get to connect with you, I'm learning from you as well. And so this allows, you to potentially leverage my resources, my, capital relationships. Obviously, you can, connect with me and contact me about anything, and we can ideate together. So you can bring the best of both worlds. Like, I've been around for a long time, might know some of the professionals who are working on these topics, and you're bringing sort of these fresh ideas to the table. I do view it as our joint responsibility to carry the torch forward and share. And so I would like to just welcome you to engage with me on any projects that you may have, etc. Did want to share a few sort of frameworks and slides with you before we open it up for discussion, which we'll do in about, I think, 8 minutes or so. And it's just around, they're just questions for you around, and they're based on notes of mine around just tech for good, etc. So I wanted to share those with you as food for thought or fodder before we kind of go into the tech piece of it. Sorry, there's a lot going on. Okay. So as I said, technology is an increasingly powerful societal force. It's affecting every aspect of our lives. Mobile, the way we basically communicate with our loved ones, the way we access healthcare, the way we access education. If you think about causes, they have often historically been discussed in isolation. There's education, there's jobs and economic empowerment, there's the environment, but they cannot be discussed in isolation because they are all related. And if you think about those who are most, let's say, impoverished, if they can't access health, that impacts how they access education. If they can't access education, that impacts their economic empowerment. And then that impacts the entire community and how the community shows up for the planet. So they're all really very much interrelated. So I think some notion of these connections and root cause analysis is important in any work that you're doing. Technology, though, on the plus side, as I mentioned, has the power to be a multiplier. It can really have impact at scale, because once you solutionize something for one community, you can try to figure out how to bring it to other communities, as long as those ways to sort of learn and to share knowledge exist. Technology is also shaping and influencing norms. So if you think about culture and how people prefer to engage, back when I was growing up, it was all about voice. It was all about telephone. It is moving more toward voice, but a lot of people these days only use sort of text. And that's a minor example, but it's really shaping the way we think about what is normalized and what is not normalized. So there's a cultural element. So as I, mentioned before, there are these global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, and they are not the be-all, end-all, and they are connected to one another. But I do think they provide a very good framework to ground your work in. They are becoming more and more understood. They are supposedly, intended to be universally understood. So figuring out what the indicators are for each of these as you think about measuring the impact of your work, also figuring out, the ties between one goal versus the other and how you're pursuing it is important. Whenever I'm designing something or thinking about something, I'm always trying to figure out, what are the outcomes? What are the 4 or 5 key outcomes I'm driving toward in 1 year, in 3 year, etc. So a framework around that is important, and the SDGs is one way to do that. And then it's about, what are the different levers I'm pulling, or what is the theory of change of what I'm trying to create that really is solving the problem, whatever the problem may be related to the SDG. So we talked a little bit about, people and planet, sustainability, AI, tech. I think it all ultimately comes down to, at least for me personally, is a societal well-being, and purpose is certainly a component of that, but it is how we derive meaning and how we derive meaning as a society, and how healthy and how like good we're feeling about our lives. Those are all very much interrelated concepts. The OECD has an excellent sort of well-being framework. So here I have pulled different concepts from different well-being frameworks. There's this notion of societal well-being, which is around workforce and employment and livelihood, standard of living, very much related, and education. Excuse me, for the individual, it's often about your personal health, your personal safety, your social connection. And then, even more broadly, at sort of a planet level, it's often about sustainability, equality, and justice, and trust, because trust is kind of the foundation that allows people to innovate, work together, and achieve certain things together. So there's all these great ideas out there. There's obviously these sustainable development goals. There are more and more opportunities to create a business case out of some of the work that is being done. But where do some of the challenges lie? And I think the challenges lie with technology in that a lot of people are trying to solve the same problem. So there is duplication, and technology can be resource intensive, to innovate around. So for example, you need the right expertise. You need a way to design these pilots, to test these pilots. So you need to be you need to have corporations or communities willing to go out there and try this. That is very resource intensive. And that's where something like partnering with a larger company or an employee there or an advisor could come in handy. There's also a learning curve. So oftentimes, enterprises or projects are very nimble. You have 4 or 5 people. You're trying to do really hard, complicated work. So there's this learning curve of how do you, bring it to life. And then sometimes even with on the ground sort of grassroots entrepreneurs, it's a learning curve of even using technology. So everyone's falling in different places on this digital skills sort of curve. How do you help fill in some of those gaps? And finally, it is an investment. And with the ROI aspect of it, sometimes you don't see the return immediately. You see the return in year 3 or later. So how do you justify that investment over time? So I thought we could talk about, 3 different things. One is, how do you develop programs and initiatives to serve beneficiaries or communities better? I would love to hear from you, from the projects. And it doesn't have to be these 3 things. These are just 3 things I thought of, whatever you want to talk about. 2, how do you more effectively garner resources for what you're working on, like what your experience has been to date? Would love to hear from you on that. And then how you're thinking about your outcomes or what you're driving toward as you're sort of designing. I do have a couple of frameworks that I was going to share with you, and we'll do so if we get to, if there's time for that. I did want to throw out one more thing, is that I think that there are a lot of frameworks and strategies around how you measure impact and impact of technology. And there's actors and capital and assets on 2 different sides, almost like a marketplace, but there isn't that transparency and accountability. So if I have a really great idea on gender empowerment, if there's an accelerator or a corporate sort of sponsor who's interested, great, I know that. But I don't have the universe available to me of options to choose from for funding, for advisory support, etc. Similarly, those who are looking to invest more in certain topics don't have this, like catalog available. So how do we sort of close some of those gaps and build a marketplace that's more connected around that? And then what do the incentives look like on each side to engage one another? And how can we collaborate? Because I think there needs to be collaboration of entities who are operating at scale. Again, corporations are what I'm talking about because I'm coming from a corporation, but it could be a government program. It could be, a fund of sorts. How do those really large scale entities and vehicles find the right projects and engage and collaborate? And then how do those entrepreneurs or aspiring, youth, etc., find the resources to connect up and to move more quickly on whatever it is they're trying to achieve? So I want to leave you on that and then, turn it back to Sanjana and open it up for some discussion.
Thank you. That was an amazing presentation. Yeah, does anyone have any points to add on to that? And want to talk about their project ideas on like, because I know a lot of you guys are working on projects like this that are really pushing for like not just sustainability in the environment, but also sustainability in our society in general, right? So will these slides be shared with us later on via Discord or email? Yeah, so we will send these slides on Discord and email as well. So don't worry, and this recording will also be available on YouTube for everyone to be able to view.
I mean, I would love to hear about some of the projects people are working on and to try to frame things up because I know it was super broad in general. So if I have a greater sense of what everyone's working on, maybe it'll generate some discussion.
Mm-hmm. Does someone want to share? I know there's a lot of great ideas and projects going out there. If not, I can definitely pick out a few like already submitted ones and talk about them. Does anyone want to share? Or it doesn't even have to be what you're working on, even like an idea that you have. All right, well, I guess I can look at some of the different ones on submitted that I submitted already. So, and I won't name names, so don't worry about that if you've already submitted it. Cool. So let me. There was someone typing. People are typing. All right, so. Ooh, this one's a cool one. Let's look at this one. Some of these are really cool. So one person created an app that takes image classification and gamification to help users accurately recycle and dispose of water and through like a fun like game like medium. And I think that's really cool. So it's like an app that people can use, and then what it does is it gives like image recognition of like whatever like I think they like take a picture of whatever your thing is, and then it helps you choose which one it's meant to go into, and then it rewards you like points, and then you get into the right place. That was a really cool one. Ooh. Should an acid-based test indicator be based on AI? If not, what are other technologies we could use for developing something like that? That's a question for you, Samira.
Yeah, first I wanted to comment on the sort of classification and changing behaviors. So one thing I didn't mention is just the growing importance of behavior change. You know, we talked about technology and norm setting, et cetera. You know, there's a huge conversation around how you can apply sort of behavioral science when you design certain things and this notion of incentives and rewards. So I do think that's a really, really cool idea and how that then, you know, impacts people and their actions and that changes the conditions around you and also how people sort of think, their awareness and their knowledge around whatever the topic is. So that's really cool. As for this in the chat, should an acid-based test indicator, sorry, something else came up as well. Acid-based test indicator be based on AI? If not, what other technologies could we use for developing something like that? I do not have a good answer to that. I think it really depends on, you know, the strength of the data around that topic, and it's just not something I'm close to, but you know, I can try to look into it. And I think it really does come into to the integrity and the quality of data that's being used for a lot of these things. And when that is not up to a certain threshold or par, TBD, who defines that, it's probably best not to go that direction yet. So that's why one of the things as sort of a tech company, I mean, I used to work for Salesforce before Microsoft on their impact innovation team. We've really been focused on how do we create sort of stronger data pools that represent, you know, a variety, a diverse group of people, and that includes high integrity and high quality data that can be used by multiple parties. So this notion of data collaboration and sharing. And then there's a YouTube video that got, oh, I see. Sorry, this is other stuff. Yeah, so that's all I have to say for that piece. What else? How else can I, help or support? So Sanjana, can you tell me a little bit more about what you envision with, having these workshops, and what are the goals and outcomes you're driving toward, and just a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve? I'd love to hear, because you have relationships with all these great, young people all over the world doing really cool work. So what are you trying to help them enable, and what is your goal, and how did this all get started? Just would love to hear a little bit more about that as well. And sorry if it's covered in previous workshops and you don't if you don't want to spend the time here, you can keep it super brief.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief because we covered this a lot in the opening ceremony, but basically our founder, Ilea, she had this idea to kind of create like a place for wanting to solve like the climate crisis for people who really want to, like get involved in environmentalism who don't really know how, but also really like technology, right? So it kind of creates a way for people to get to learn both and start using technology and coding to actually push it towards something good, right? So I guess now so after like the years of like developing Ethiopian and whatever, like we started creating like a more streamlined mission to be able to empower like students to get into tech themselves and use that tech that they create to create like a more like greener future, like to fight the climate crisis, right? Because climate crisis is so big, it's everywhere, that it's not solely like few people who are like the biggest developers at Microsoft, like only those can't be the ones fighting the climate crisis, right? Like it has to be everyone hands on deck. So that was basically the behind the scenes of why we wanted to push for this. So we want to create kind of like an opportunity for everyone to learn about coding because you have to start somewhere, right? And hackathon or Envirothon just kind of puts it into your hands and then just makes you be like, yeah, here's all the resources you need. You can do it, create your project. And that's really what's been going on. So using this, so every single submission that we've been getting like is an actual viable solution for helping the environment, right? And after that, like after this Envirothon, we're going to be encouraging people to continue with that solution because there's going to be like over 300 great solutions that people are going to be having that really do make a difference. So apart from that, like that's kind of where we stand.
No, that's really cool. And I know with the urgency of the issue, I mean, all this kind of work is all the more important. So have you been able to, garner, I guess, interest and support relatively easily given the how important, the topic is, and what does it look like to bring together like a global group of people? How did everyone hear about you and get connected up into this? Just like
Well,
social media or relationships? Just curious how you brought such a diverse group together, or
well,
ambassadors.
yeah, a
Sorry.
lot of no worries. We did a lot of social media at first and then kind of like grew and then went on to like different like Discord servers, for example, and started like promoting through there. And then once we started reaching like audience, so like the founder is actually in India, like based in India. So once we started reaching over to places like the United States where I'm based out of, right? Like it started like reaching out from there, like United States branching to like Canada, India branching to like Indonesia, for example, and then like on and on and on. So kind of started like a chain reaction through social media that people were able to get together and like really bond through this.
Great. And if there's any relevant competitions or venues I hear about, would love to share them with you. Just let me know, Sanjana, if you just want me, or Nushka, if you just want me to send you an email, or if there's a place I should be sharing that kind of stuff, and to keep up with the work you're doing. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I'll flip it back over to you all in the group here if there's any other things you want to discuss.
Thank you. Now, does anybody have any questions for Samira? I really recommend asking anything, even about AI in general, about what she does at Microsoft. Oh, hello in the chat. Um, even about what she does. I think I recommend that since this is the last, especially this is the last speaker session, I believe, before the closing ceremony, like using this time to really ask any questions you have away, and I know she'll be more than happy to answer them.
If it's a shy bunch, you can connect with me one-on-one and happy to point you to the right people or if I know them or to any resources. Obviously, connected with the global dialogue more broadly, more of a strategy, connections, and who's doing what kind of a person. As far as the nitty-gritty on terms of, specific technologies, I can always try to find the right person for you. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. This is amazing that you were able to come. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come speak. I know
Yeah,
everyone.
no worries. Good luck, Sanjana. Good luck, Anushka.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining.
Mhm.
Now, for everyone, there is the closing ceremony tonight, and it is required unless it's like at a wacky time for you to come join that. So let me send that link in the chat. And oh, okay, I just already got the hackathon guide. So all these recordings will be up. I will stop recording.